Municipal Watch, bringing your local issues on the national agenda. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us.
Whew! It's 17 past 10. Those conversations are sometimes very hard, but I suppose very necessary. Welcome to the second hour of the show. So, where are we? We are, we are right here. Yes, I had lost that piece of paper. There we go. So 2.95 trillion has been allocated for 9 provinces and 257 municipalities over the medium-term expenditure. That's up to March of 2028. And this announcement was made during last week's budget speech, which was tabled by our Finance Minister, Minister Enoch Godongwana. The minister also highlighted that National Treasury will be issuing grant funding to municipalities based on performance and reward functional municipalities. And this was a measure, this as a measure forms part of the commitment to improve revenue generation, efficiency and accountability in the lower spheres of government. President Cyril Ramaphosa, in his State of the Nation address, talked also about phase 2 of Operation Vulindlela, the institutional structure of local government, and said it will be reviewed through the updating of the white paper on local government. That's 71 municipalities who are under the municipal debt relief program, and the structure will be reviewed in agreement with G20 members to bolster capacity for minerals and energy. We are I've got my paperwork all over the place, but through updating, the white paper on local government and focus on fiscal framework for municipal levels. And our next guest is a regular on this segment and has written an article that has raised the importance of structural reform, investment in infrastructure, and investing in human capital to transform local municipalities to improve service delivery. And to help us unpack if the budget for municipalities is sufficient and can work towards meeting these expectations, we're joined by Mielani Holeni, Group Chief Advisor at Intiso Consulting Group. Mielani, hi.
Hi, good morning, KG, and good morning to the listener.
2.95 trillion allocated to 257 municipalities, and yet we are a people who are beset with service delivery challenges, and municipalities are not able to be functional, some of them or most of them actually. How do we get around it? What did you propose in your article?
Well, I think the allocation, as you put it, is obviously over the 3 years in terms of the entire spheres of government. Largely, when we look at municipalities, they tend to attract an equitable share or have been allocated about 115 billion, which is going to be rising, in fact, 99.5 billion in 24-25 and then to 115. So municipalities continue to enjoy only 10% of the entire fiscal allocation from National Treasury. And the breakdown is as follows. At National, we see always a consistent 44 to 45% of that entire budget that is allocated annually, and then about 43 or between 42 to 43 is allocated to provinces, and consistently so less than 10% goes into the local government. And sometimes it may rise because of some of the grants that are being repurposed. So local government, because of the assumptions that have been made in the local government white paper, it is said that they must raise their own revenue to about 90%, and the 10% will be coming from the fiscal. So really, I think if you look at the funding model for municipalities, it remains as it was, despite the moving of funds backwards and forwards for specific or special purposes. So municipalities or local government, if we may put it in totality, continues to be funded at only about 10%, which has proved to be inadequate over time.
One of the things that you talk about in your article is the issue of the investment in unlocking human potential, right? And but we can't be oblivious to the fact that 38 million people in this country live below the upper middle income poverty line. Unemployment remains stubbornly high. It's fluctuating between 32 and 33.5%. How do we unlock this human potential? How do we get people to pay for services that they can't even afford to pay for?
And I think that's precisely the point, because the purpose of at least a budget, for anyone who may be sitting at home and wondering what this budget means to them or should mean to everyone in the country, is exactly that. We know that this budget has always an aspect which must deal with past, injustices or redress, the past, to try and bring up everyone to a point where at least, there is uniformity, and to reduce the issue of inequality, which is a bigger one. And alongside inequality, we know there's poverty and then unemployment, as you have mentioned. So we still have a large chunk of people who this budget must still be able to touch, but not touch in a way of handouts. And I think that's the important point which I want to just, stay on. Economic mobility is unlocking human potential in a way that, the citizenry are having a number of pathways and options to be able to pull themselves out of poverty. The one way is through education, which we know that, education can be an equalizer, and if done well, it can be a differentiator for most of the people to be able to move up. And the example is that, for every engineer that, qualifies through university or through the University of Technology, there are a number of people, as many as 12 sometimes, that, whose jobs can be created by having someone who is highly technical and skilled in that way. And the same can go to other industries where we have professionals, because when you have more and more professionals and technically qualified people, you are bringing into the fore the job creation aspect of things, because you have people who have the know-how, people who have the technical skills, and would be able to at least drive industry or drive the economy or drive services in a particular way. So the big thing is that we sit with the sector education and training authorities. They tend to enjoy quite a large chunk of money to look at what the allocation is from the budget. So the way that the sitters at least have been training people, we ought to look at, how then that can at least, be broadened to bring more relevant skills that are required in the economy. And that is not to say that, there are skills which should not be encouraged for, but the skills that are more urgent, the skills that can go into beneficiation, the skills that can go into industry, can go into manufacturing, can go into driving those special economic zones and industrial zones. So that is the repurposing, I think, of the funds that are sitting with the sitters, and the funds that are also sitting within the private sector where they offer breakthrough schemes. So we need to be training, in this case, in a biased manner for skills that are required within the economy to drive the economy forward. And as to what the NDP has identified, that the economy should be growing at about 5.4%, but we need those technical and human resources and to mainstream people so that they go into the training programs that enable them to be skills ready, to be job ready.
Yeah. How then do we create employment opportunities at municipal level?
Well, I think, municipalities, just like the rest of government, their job is not to create direct jobs, but is to make the environment conducive for industry to attract, to come through and set up their own factories, to set up their own production houses, to set up, various, aspects. So what municipalities should be looking at are incentives. And those incentives that, would go and attract, specific organizations, and at least put down incentives that would say, if you come and build X, Y, Z here, we are going to give you a waiver on property rates for a period of X until you are able to set up and so on. So those incentives that are all encompassing, as well as fast-tracking the ability for those investors to be able to establish themselves, as opposed to be pulled, from pillar to post, trying to get approvals of one form or the other. So there also needs to be that aspect of incentives that are carefully crafted, and those incentives at least can even result in some cases through the national, through SARS to have tax incentives that would be beneficial for those investors. Also creating jobs in terms of, the rebates that they would receive so that they are able to stay in a particular area and are able to be located within there. And of course, the rest of it, is to be able to guarantee things like energy, things like water, good roads, and so on. So municipalities' role, together with the rest of government, is to create those circumstances such that, companies would be saying, I am going east, or I am going south, or I'm going north because it is in close proximity to all of the services that are required, the incentives work, for me, then I'm going to absorb, people. Then the sitters as well should be positioning themselves to be able to support those investors or the new companies or the startups, for that matter, to be able to train the people. And I give an example here of the special economic zone in Tshwane, which is, dealing with, the motor industry and manufacturing of parts and manufacturing of the Ford Ranger, which, is something that, will continue to absorb, people and train people from paintwork, from mechanics, to assemblers, all of those, different skills that are there. Those are the skills that should be going into those areas. The special economic zone in Musina Makado is one that, should also be able to attract investors and bring in the skills and necessary training programs to upskill the people to take on. And we can talk about all the special economic zones in a way that, they should be pulling together from incentives, that may come from DTIC, that may be promulgated through the budget in terms of helping municipalities with grants to set up a special infrastructure, as well as, getting the education or at least the sectors to be able to come through as well and complement the upskilling of people to be able to drive those industries that have been identified.
I want to talk about how we create a competitive advantage for municipalities and how, because I have to go to the news headlines, specifically how we reprofessionalize this very critical sphere of governance. Because a lot of people say that it's so overly sort of politicized, it's mostly political players that are there, and the professionalization of the space is out of it, and that's why it doesn't deliver. I want to talk about how we professionalize it to make sure that we give it a sort of competitive edge. But that's when we come back from break. We'll continue our discussion with Mielani Holeni, Group Chief Advisor at Ntiliso Consulting. He is a regular on this segment, and he's written an article that has raised the importance of structural reform, investment in infrastructure, and investing in human capital to transform local municipalities to improve service delivery. We'll continue our discussion with Mielani in a short while. It's 10:30.
You are listening to KG Mwekezi on SAFM.
So welcome back. If you just joined our discussion, we're talking how National Treasury allocates budgets to municipalities. And the focus of our discussion is based on an article that was written by Mielani Holeni, Group Chief Advisor at Ntiliso Consulting. And he has raised the importance of structural reform, investment in infrastructure, and investing in human capital to transform local municipalities to improve service delivery. So I was talking about the issue of how we reprofessionalize this critical sphere of governance so that we can give it some sort of competitive advantage for it to, to gain a competitive, foot forward.
Absolutely. And I think that is one of the, it's almost becoming a swan song where everyone from the president to the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Culture, and in fact everyone in government recognizes that when we have a local government that is professional, that has high service levels, that is able to deliver services. Also, we go back to the question of how do we envisage municipalities being structured going forward? We've had municipalities, in the past, where, for instance, you've had, in pre-apartheid, which were for, certain races and arranged along those, levels. And the one thing that we can always go back to is that in certain areas, for instance, those more urban areas, municipalities, were seen to be functioning, but, in the more rural areas, it was always, struggled unless if, there was a mix of homeland. So the issue here is when we professionalize or re-professionalize or upskill or improve and optimize municipalities, how do we see those municipalities operating in the future? Number one is a municipality currently, besides, the systems that are there for finance and so on, is largely manual. It's largely, you have to go in queue and sit in a queue. We start to see systems here and there which, are coming forward, but not in an integrated manner. And more so, the more the payment systems where you can pay online, which helps a lot because not all of us, you sitting behind the mic will have the time to walk to the municipality to go and resolve a query. So we need to really implement, technology within municipalities. And that technology is one that, can allow for multiple channels of people to interact with municipalities, whether it's to log queries, whether it's to request new services, or whether it's to make payments, or even to submit, meter readings, for instance. We do see in some of the municipalities where it's happening, it is assisting a lot because you even see the evidence that is submitted, whether it's taking a picture with your phone and you upload the reading, and those readings are updated and it becomes a bill that is not estimated. So technology will play a critical aspect of the municipality of the future. We also then, alongside with technology, are saying that, the investment that must go into municipalities is to ensure that, the skills, levels as well are also improved because you need engineers at local government. You need accountants and chartered accountants for that matter. You need, people who are skilled, in customer service. You also need, call centers that, would be able to respond, to the volume of people who are phoning the municipality for one reason or the other. So really, I think the reconceptualization of municipalities, and I think what must go into the local government white paper. We have spoken about, the issue of revenue. Municipalities would need to be supported, much more than they currently are, and not be left, to create, their own, means. But the technology, the human skills, development that must go into municipalities is crucial. The structure of a municipality, insofar as the political versus the administrative, it's something that at this point, we unfortunately will have to live with because that is a constitutional matter that would have to be dealt with at constitutional level. But the reforms to the municipalities can and should proceed without taking or at least looking back. But as soon as we have the necessary skills that are there, the vacancies that are filled, and perhaps with the use of technology, we could even reduce the number of vacancies that would be there. Because to process, for instance, the submission of plans for building, it's something that should be submitted electronically. It should be at least someone can receive it, review it, and be able to give feedback and comments and so on. So there are a number of opportunities where we can make local government more efficient, and those efficiencies will start counting for improvements in service levels and improvements in the output of where local government is. There is no doubt that someone must still go and fill a pothole. That must be done, but let us at least be able to identify all the places using whether it's mobile devices to catalog and to capture the areas where those potholes are forming. And eventually, once you get to a point where there are multiple potholes, you then need to be refurbishing that road. And that is, I think, the methods that, we should be driving at so that, we don't keep on pouring money into maintenance whereas, the infrastructure is due for upgrade or refurbishment or renewal completely. So I think the professionalization of local government is a sum total of those things around technology, around skills, and around, efficient processes that would allow even a municipality to be open for 24 hours through technology and not just, during working hours.
A human being there. Okay.
Absolutely.
So then, how do we now raise revenue with debts that exist with service providers like Eskom and water? Because those are big debts, and you juxtapose that against the unemployment rate, that we're sitting in, because we have to raise revenue, but how? How do we do it?
So firstly, I think the raising of revenue within municipalities will differ according to the cities. Some of the locals that don't have all the services, districts we know that they don't render services particularly, except some who are water services authorities. So the codification and the understanding of the revenue line items within municipalities is crucial. But let's take a typical municipality that has all the services. In other words, there's the big five, which would be electricity, water, sewer, refuse, as well as the property rate, which will always be there. We need to have a mindset of completeness of revenue. And completeness of revenue means that, every line item of revenue that is supposed to be billed to a customer must be billed, and we must have checks, and we must have a simulation of billing to ensure that that is happening. But that depends as well on the municipality knowing who their customer is, knowing their customer in terms of where they are located, whether it's a GIS, location, geographical information systems, as well as, the systems that, are there from a billing point of view. So what we always, advocate is that, for revenue to be generated, you must know at least the services that are being rendered within but of course the customer, and then alongside that, to be able to measure the consumption, where there's no measurement such as property rates, and it's a fixed, amount which is divided by 12 according to the formula which is in the Municipal Property Rates Act. You are able to then bill, easily. Things like refuse is a fixed amount, depending on the number of dustbins you have. So really, I think, municipalities should be investing in having this master data that would have their customers, that would catalog their products, that would also create the tariffs that eventually go into their billing engine. So that is the traditional way of raising revenue, because that is what municipalities have. We also then must understand the issues of leakages within the system, where there could be, in cases, to give an example, where it's prepaid electricity, where there should be monitoring. So we need to have systems that constantly monitor the consumption or the usage of services to identify patterns and trends. If there are declining trends, whereas, they've always been high up, it means, then it should call for action that's going to be able to address, the issues. And with prepaid meters, we have situations where people could breach the meter, where it becomes a low buy. In other words, someone, instead of buying for 200, will buy for 50 rand. That would be a low buy. So those are indicators that can be seen through proper monitoring of systems, or in some cases they don't purchase at all, and it's impossible that a prepaid meter does not purchase, whereas there is consumption or the lights are on within there. So we also need to invest, as I've said, when I spoke about technology earlier, it also comes in terms of, streamlining processes to monitor the entire revenue to ensure that it's complete. All customers are being billed for what they are consuming, and the bills arrive on time, and those bills are accurate. So that is the one way. The next aspect is that municipalities also have land, which they should be at least taking and converting into revenue. And how you convert land into revenue, you can list it out to various, businesses or people who would like to start various enterprises. You can also erect outdoor advertising boards, which is something that advertisers, are always looking for space. In the telcos, you also have, those big antennas, which must be planted, somewhere on someone's land. Currently, we see that, they are mostly within the private land, which is in someone's residential area.
Yeah.
But municipalities should be competing for that because they also are the ones who supply electricity and they have availability of land, and that structure can be protected, from the vandalism or at least, any other damage and so on. So there are multiple other areas. Municipalities as well run a lot of tractors to do grass cutting, to do various things. And those are engines that, utilize diesel that are not on the road. So you are able to claim a rebate, from those aspects. So there are large pockets of revenue within municipalities which require the discipline of those municipalities to be able to then set up specific areas or departments and dedicate people as well as, utilize technology to be able to measure and catalog all the services that are being utilized and ensure that, the end customer receives a bill. In the case of rebates, those rebates are claimed, from SARS, the VAT returns and all of those things. So there are many pockets of revenue within a municipality, some of which are neglected. The other one is through the road accident fund, where there's damage of traffic lights when there are accidents. There's third-party claims which people walk away with money which they claim individually, but some municipalities don't go so far as claiming for damage, to their infrastructure, and even from the insurance companies and so on. So you can imagine the ecosystem of a municipality from a revenue point of view. The other aspect is, around fiber. And I think this is where municipalities have lost the opportunity to be able to earn money from fiber. They give leeways, or at least, the ability for the companies to trench on their own roads and to lay fibers, to lay the fiber. And this is the private, fiber providers, whether it's your Dark Fiber Africa or your private, fiber, provider. So the opportunity there would have been to say, okay, you are going to damage our road. Yes, you're going to patch it up, but we want, 1 cent, from whatever, meg of data that you are selling to the population or whoever. So those would have been opportunities, but it's not too late for some of the municipalities because the rollout has not necessarily gone to the last mile. So they could invest, or co-invest with, those particular entities. So I'm just saying the ecosystem of a municipality has abundance of revenue and opportunities, but it also now depends on how you develop those opportunities to the point where you convert them into services and you convert them into a bill that someone can be paying.
But, Mielane, I live in South Africa. I live in South Africa where there's also the issue of indigent residents, right? Does this mean will we ever get to a stage where indigent residents will be at a risk of losing access to their free basic services given the low revenue that's coming into municipalities? Because there's a lot of indigent households in South Africa.
Yeah, and that I think is a risk that we must not be oblivious to, because as much as the budget is being stretched in the way that it's being stretched, and there are additional grants that are also coming in, such as the SRB. We always have known that there's a free basic services allocation through the equitable share. But I think, as we go forward and there's shortage of revenue, there is a risk that free basic services could be lost. However, what we are seeing is that there's a concerted effort from National Treasury to support municipalities whose populations are increasing and where the indigent registers have been captured properly and are clear and show that there is indeed verified indigent within the area. The other way that they of course do it is to deem those households that are below a certain property value to be indigent. But the risk going forward is that the budget must be performing. Obviously, the revenue must be generated. And I think, the issue of revenue goes back to how national government as well as provincial governments, such as what we've seen in Gauteng, reflecting on the fact that, 95% of their revenue comes from the fiscal and only 5% from their own revenue. So that it means that to support the indigents, the budget at least is currently ring-fenced, and there's a ring-fencing of those amounts within there. But then the other aspects, means that, that's where, as we go forward and if indigents increase, then we have a real problem. But if we encourage the economic development activity in attraction of investors, it tends to at least improve the amount of revenue at the disposal of municipalities, as well as the disposal of government in totality, to be able to still ring-fence the issue of indigent. But the idea as well in terms of economic mobility is, from an indigent household, you would like to see children or students that study, go forward, and are able to then get jobs or start businesses and are able to fend for themselves, and in that way can start supporting some of the households and pulling them out of the poverty line.
We'll continue our conversation with Mielani Holeni. Fascinating conversation, really. He is Group Chief Advisor at Ndiso Consulting, and he's a regular on the segment. And he's written an article post the budget that has raised the importance of structural reform, investment, and infrastructure in investing in human capital to transform our local municipalities. And he's breaking that down for us. We'll continue our discussion with him in a short while.
Municipal Watch, bringing your local issues on the national agenda. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us.
10:54, we are in conversation with Mielani Holeni, Group Chief Advisor at Ndiso Consulting. So, Mielani, do you believe the budget allocation that has been made in this medium term to be enough to make a meaningful impact, particularly on service delivery? I mean, South Africans are crying about service delivery. It doesn't matter the municipality, wherever you go, South Africans are just crying about service delivery.
Well, I think the best of what the minister has been able to have at his disposal, I think they've put it forward. We also know that there's an issue of a budget deficit, which the country is running. And the budget deficit in this case is trying to get to all the needs that have been raised by the citizenry. So the way that, the revenue has been apportioned, and I think, the aspects, which I want to just, touch on with regards to infrastructure, 1 trillion allocated to infrastructure over the medium-term expenditure framework. That is significant, because that goes into now starting to address the issues of building forward, building the country, and possibly pulling the country out of the slump that we are currently facing. The other aspect is the funding of what they call the Operation Vulindlela, which they've allocated.
I was going to ask about that, because he announced phase 2 of that Operation Vulindlela.
Absolutely. So that is significant.
Yeah. How will the review of that fiscal framework at municipal level help then improve financial management, accountability, and service delivery?
I think what the review must do is to go and look at now what is the reality. Local government was built on assumptions, of which those assumptions, went gone into revenue, into economic development, into a number of different areas. So now that we have the data points, almost 30 years on, we can use now the data points to be able to drive how many local governments should be working. And we already have spoken ad nauseum about revenue. Let's talk about economic development. The muscle to develop the local economy is said to be residing with municipalities, but really municipalities don't have the levers. So part of that reform from a local government, a white paper point of view into the new how the new local government should be working, is to actually give more muscle to local government to be able to determine things like incentives, to be able to craft, things like, tax rebates, but obviously linked to the national fiscal, is to be able to at least, come back, with some levies that, would be supporting the growth of particular industries. So the issue of reviewing the local government white paper is to deal with those assumptions that had been put forward in 1999, that at least we have now data points, we have statistics, we have realities and so on. But the idea then is to be able to then, and I don't want to use the word legislate, but to at least create regulations that, put forward the type of skills that are required within there, the type of qualification and the experience. And in this case, to go and look into the other spheres of government for those skills that are going to be particularly placed or seconded to local government to drive the programs of local government with regards, to improvements. Because we know provincially, you sit with people who are educated, masters, this, and it's not to say that you don't find them in local government, but we don't find enough of them in local government that, can at least, be able to bring the brain power, to bring the skills power, to bring the implementation power, and so on and so forth. So that is what we need to be seeing, because currently with vacancies and people leaving local government because of uncertainty, and I think this is where also national and provincial government must be drawing a line in terms of the continuous interference or seem to be interfering, or things not being done the way that they should, or even the councillors that are within the space, being trained, so that they can contribute positively and create, a model where each and everyone within local government pulls together for a common goal of high performance, such as what National Treasury was saying. Each municipality should now be competing to perform or even outperform each other in terms of, certain areas, so that they can also be able to be allocated, more resources and create their own and generate their own resources to be able to do that. So I think we're seeing local government which is doing its best, but unfortunately because of, different, pockets of inefficiencies, different pockets of, lack of skills, different, pockets of, in some cases, changing of government and so on, which pulls it back. So there needs to be a determination as well in the local government white paper in terms of, how to keep continuity within the municipality so that there are less disruptions.
Mielane, there's two very important questions from our listeners to you, and they are on voice notes, and we want to play them to you, but we have to go to news because of time constraints. May I ask for your indulgence that you please give us a little 5 minutes extra, and we go to news, and then we come back with you, and we play those voice notes because they're comments and questions to you, and have you comment back to them, and then we will wrap up if you do not mind, please.
Certainly, I can never say no to the listeners.
Thank you. We'll continue then for another 5 minutes with Mielane straight after the news. It's 11 now. It's time for the news.
You are listening to KG Mwekezi on SAFM. The Talking Point on SAFM. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday. Let's have the conversation. WhatsApp voice notes on 0614 104 107.
Hi KG. Can you please ask your guest if he says they are going to help municipalities? I don't understand why are they helping municipalities every year, but money is lost on unfinished projects. And do you want to tell me that municipality workers, they till today they don't know how to fix the roads. They don't know how to clean the cities. I just don't know. It seems like they don't want people to account, the directors in the municipalities and whatever. That's what they should do.
Morning, Melanie and KG. This is Magdalene from Blue. I'm concerned about the Auditor General's outcome report. on municipalities. Because I'm asking myself, does the Auditor General audit according to the expenditure or according to the proposed budget in the municipalities? And also including the allocation of budget by the provincial, the minister, and the grants and their allocations. How do they audit? Magdalene from Bloom, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for sending those voice notes. I hope you were listening, Mielane.
Indeed, yeah. So the first question in terms of the concern of allocating perhaps more money and the fact that, municipalities don't know how to clean the streets. I think the end of the call where the caller is talking about accountability is a very weighty point, because that is what any institution must be able to demonstrate, that there's accountability from the employees, whether it's from the political leaders, to the administrative officials, all the way down to the people who are down on the ground. So the point of accountability is one that must also be engendered and be really emphasized, with regards to how municipalities are being turned around, because we also, and we know that, there are many influences, within a municipality. There's employees that, are on short-term contracts, which is Section 56 to Section 57, which is 5 years. We also have employees that are full-time. We also have employees that are also covered, by the unions in a way. So you have a number of different ways that you need to bring and talk to the various structures within municipalities. So whether you are employed permanently, accountability must also apply for consequences. But there must also be a performance management regime that leads each and every one of the people, from the political all the way down to the people who are rolling out, the services on the ground. And that is something that we have not seen being applied fully within municipalities, the issue of performance management, which leads to accountability, such that, there are consequences for whatever aspects. The second question around Auditor General. The Auditor General audits everything, if I may put it in that way, within the municipality. They will audit assets. They will look at, the assets that are there. They will look at the asset registers. They will look at, the budgets. Firstly, are they funded? Are they fully funded? They will also audit, the revenue that is coming into the municipality. They will audit, things like, estimates, to see if estimations are out of hand in terms of, for services that should be billed, at least, billed on the actual readings. They will audit all aspects, even the management, side of things, or the governance within the municipality. So really, I think what the Auditor General does is they have a tall task to look at in totality, not only the financial aspects, but the other aspects that eventually impact on the financial aspects of a municipality, to be able to determine if that institution is functional, if there are issues of irregularity, and they also have the powers to refer some of these matters to the law enforcement agencies for areas where perhaps there is fraud, or there is blatant evidence of people having taken from the municipality that which they should not be taking, or done what they should not have been, they should have not done, or broken the law in a way that violates the legislation and the regulations within the local government, whether it's through MFMA, whether it's through the Systems Act and MPRA, all the pieces of legislation that would govern the municipality and the country or constitution in totality.
A very thought-provoking piece, and a really thought-provoking contribution also today on the show. You've left all of us with a lot to think about, and I hope that municipalities themselves were listening to the conversation that we've had. Thank you, Mielane.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Mielane Holeni is Group Chief Advisor at Ndiso Consulting Group.